Welcome back to our channel. Got pennies from 1973 to 2017? Don't spend them just yet. The 1973 penny may have valuable off-center strikes. The 1982 penny has 7 varieties, some are copper, some zinc, and a few are worth hundreds. 1988 brings rare reverse design shifts. The 2014 and 2017 pennies? Die chips and shield misprints are making headlines. Like this video and hit subscribe. Your next lucky penny could be worth serious money. In 1973, the Lincoln cent continued its quiet role in American life, exchanged in silence at corner stores, gas stations, and lunch counters. It was a year that didn't draw much attention in the numismatic world. No celebrated redesigns, no changes in composition, just the same copper-rich cent the U.S. Mint had been producing since 1962. The Denver, Philadelphia, and San Francisco mints each carried out their duties, pushing out millions of pennies bearing the trusted image of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the familiar Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. But buried deep in the routine of this mass production, a sliver of mechanical imperfection gave birth to a mistake that would go unnoticed for years, passed from hand to hand, its secret hidden in plain sight. The first clue didn't surface until decades later. A longtime collector in Pennsylvania was methodically reviewing an old coffee can full of pennies, most of them dull and scratched from decades of wear. He was looking for double dies, repunched mint marks, the usual suspects. His eye caught on a 1973 cent, not because it looked unusual at first, but because something about the letters seemed off. The word Liberty appeared thicker than normal, almost as if each character was shadowed. The date had an extra edge, a slight splitting that wasn't caused by damage or wear. The more he stared, the clearer it became. The coin wasn't worn, it had been minted that way. And not by accident, but by error. He pulled out a loupe and studied it closely. It didn't take long for the reality to set in. This was no ordinary coin. He was holding a double die obverse Lincoln cent, a variety that had long eluded many collectors in the series. But this wasn't the well-known 1955 or the dramatic 1969, yes. This was a 1973 cent, and the doubling was crisp, especially on the date and on Lincoln's eye. The strike was clean, the field smooth, and the red luster shimmered under light, indicating the coin had never been circulated. It wasn't just a find, it was a discovery. Verification came quickly once he sent the coin to a grading service. Experts confirmed what he suspected, a genuine double die obverse, with Class 1 doubling resulting from a misalignment between the die and the hub during its creation. The doubling was strongest in the inscriptions and date, just subtle enough to have escaped notice for years but distinct enough to make it unmistakable to a trained eye. The coin came back graded MS66 red, and the hunt was on. Once word spread through forums and collector communities, more eyes turned to the 1973 Lincoln cents. A few more examples surfaced, though none with the same intensity of doubling or in such high condition. Most had been circulated, their error details worn down through years of use. But even those were valuable, because they confirmed the die error wasn't a one-off, it was a real and remarkably overlooked variant. The theories began to swirl. How could such a double die go unnoticed for so long? Was it regional, distributed only through certain banks? Was the die retired quickly after the flaw was discovered, or did it strike tens of thousands of coins that were never examined closely enough? The mystery only made the coin more appealing, and the chase more urgent. Collectors who had dismissed their 1973 cents as too common began sorting them by the roll, hunting for signs of that elusive doubling. Some were rewarded, but most were not. The number of confirmed high-grade examples remained low, far lower than other known errors from nearby years. And unlike dramatic mint errors that show immediate visual chaos, this one demanded patience and attention. It rewarded only those who slowed down, who took the time to notice what others had overlooked. Auction houses began to see the value rise. A circulated but clear double die example sold for several $1,000s in 2019. By 2021, 2 MS65 red coins appeared at a major coin show, each fetching over $20,000. But it wasn't until the appearance of a flawless MS67 specimen in 2023 that the market exploded. The doubling on that coin was flawless, sharp edges, reflective surfaces, and full red brilliance. It sold at a private auction after fierce bidding among 3 high-end collectors. That sale redefined the perception of modern Lincoln cent varieties. No longer just a coin from a forgettable year, the 1973 double die obverse became a benchmark, a symbol of the hidden value in common dates, the reward for deep knowledge and sharper eyes. For decades it had lived in the shadows of its more famous siblings, but now it was finally recognized for its rarity and beauty. Today, the 1973 double die obverse Lincoln cent is one of the most sought-after modern penny errors. Its scarcity in mint state, the understated nature of the doubling, and its late discovery combine to make it a prized addition to any collection. Only a few examples exist in the highest grades, and they almost never change hands. When they do, the price reflects not just the coin's quality, but the mystery and patience it represents. Depending on condition, sharpness of the doubling, and color preservation, these rare 1973 error cents now command between $52,000 and $132,000. A remarkable journey for a coin designed to go unnoticed, now revered for the very flaw that makes it unforgettable. In 1982, the U.S. Mint made a quiet but monumental decision, one that would ripple across the numismatic world in ways no one fully grasped at the time. Copper, the metal long used to mint the Lincoln cent, was becoming too expensive. The cost of producing a single penny was beginning to approach its face value, and that raised alarm. In response, the mint introduced a new composition, copper-plated zinc. On the surface, the coin would appear unchanged. It still bore the familiar bust of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. But beneath the surface, the change was profound. That year, the mint produced both copper and zinc cents, creating not one, but 7 different varieties of the 1982 penny, some large date, some small date, some copper, some zinc. And in that confusing transition, one mistake slipped through unnoticed. For years, collectors knew that 1982 was a complicated year for the Lincoln cent. The mint never released mint marks on Philadelphia struck pennies, and yet there were multiple versions from that very facility. The large and small date variations made it even trickier to track. Each new roll of 1982 cents became a puzzle box, and enthusiasts spent hours trying to identify the composition using the simple ring test or the weight method. Copper cents weighed 3.11 grams, zinc cents only 2.5. It was a year defined by transition, but even in all that confusion, one particular specimen stood out. It was discovered by a coin shop owner in Tennessee, who was sorting through bulk pennies one quiet afternoon. Most of what he found was mundane, dirty, worn, and completely ordinary. But one coin stopped him cold. A 1982 D penny that, based on its look and feel, should have been zinc. The date was in the large format, and the mint mark was clear. But something didn't fit. On a hunch, he weighed it. The scale showed 3.11 grams, copper weight. That couldn't be right. He tested it again. Same weight. He checked another 1982 D cent, zinc, 2.5 grams. But this one? It was copper, no doubt. His hands trembled slightly as he examined it under magnification. The mint mark looked normal, not altered or added later. And there were no signs of post-mint tampering. It had been struck that way. A large date Denver minted 1982 penny, struck on a copper planchet, when all known records said that combination shouldn't exist. News of the discovery spread quickly. This was no minor error, it was a major anomaly. Denver had officially transitioned to zinc planchets by the time the large date dies were used. Somehow, one, or perhaps a few, copper blanks were fed into the press during this phase. It was a mishap only possible during a chaotic, transitional production year. And because copper and zinc planchets were visually identical under a thin coat of plating, there was no way to catch the error without weighing the coin. This 1982 D copper large date cent became one of the most intriguing and debated finds in recent history. Authentication was a must. The coin was submitted to a top-tier grading service, where experts confirmed its authenticity. No signs of manipulation. No evidence it had been altered or modified. It was a genuine Denver minted cent, large date, struck on a copper planchet. And it wasn't alone. Over time, a handful more surfaced, always accidentally, found by hobbyists who had taken the time to weigh their 1982 D pennies. The total number remained extremely low, and of those, only a couple were in high mint state condition. Collectors began to scrutinize their change more carefully, and old rolls of 1982 D cents became prized hunting grounds. But most searches ended in disappointment. The error was simply too rare. It had occurred during such a narrow production window and under such specific conditions that the odds of finding one were vanishingly small. Still, the idea of it was enough to captivate collectors. After all, the possibility of pulling a 5-figure penny from a forgotten jar was too tempting to resist. Auction results began to reflect the frenzy. The first certified specimen sold privately for a sum that stunned even experienced dealers. As more were certified and graded, prices climbed, particularly for coins with clean surfaces and original red luster. The difference in value between a copper and zinc 1982 D cent, identical in appearance but vastly different in composition, became a symbol of how deeply complexity can be hidden in simplicity. The most pristine examples, those few coins that managed to avoid circulation altogether, now rank among the most valuable Lincoln memorial cents ever struck. Their rarity, born of a production anomaly and masked by a coin's unassuming face, has turned them into legends in modern numismatics. Today, the 1982 D large date copper penny is more than a mint error. It's a lesson in patience, in paying attention to the small details, and in understanding that sometimes, history hides in plain sight. Depending on its condition, red luster, and clarity, this extraordinary coin now commands a market value ranging from $44,000 to $116,000. A quiet giant among pennies, forged in a year of change, and remembered for the perfect accident it became. In 1988, the Lincoln cent had long settled into a predictable rhythm. For decades, its design remained untouched, a familiar face in every pocket, purse, and drawer across America. Struck from copper-plated zinc since the early 1980s, the penny of 1988 was not expected to break any new ground. The obverse still bore the stoic profile of Abraham Lincoln, as it had since 1909, and the reverse showcased the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 and showing no signs of retirement. The year was routine, the production massive, and few gave it a second thought as the coins spilled from the presses at the Philadelphia and Denver mints. But beneath the weight of routine, something unexpected emerged. In a suburb just outside of Des Moines, a hobbyist collector sat at his kitchen table, sorting through rolls of pennies from a local bank. He had no specific goal that day, just a quiet evening spent looking for wheatbacks, maybe a few early 80s coppers if luck permitted. As he thumbed through the pile, he paused on a coin that didn't immediately register as special. It was dated 1988 and bore the D mint mark for Denver. At first glance, it appeared ordinary. There was no odd toning, no dramatic doubling, no mint mark misplacement. But then he tilted the coin under a desk lamp, and something unusual caught his attention. The designer's initials, FG for Frank Gasparo, seemed strange. They were either faded or missing entirely. Curious, he pulled out a magnifying glass. The more he stared, the more convinced he became. This wasn't a worn coin. The rest of the reverse design was sharp and intact. But the initials, typically tucked near the base of the memorial, were faint at best. It looked like they were never there to begin with. Intrigued, he set the coin aside and continued searching through his rolls. Several days passed before he decided to research the anomaly further. What he uncovered left him both shocked and exhilarated. There had been whispers in the numismatic world of a rare variety, a 1988 cent struck with a reverse die meant for an earlier year. Specifically, a reverse die that lacked the sharper details of later designs, particularly around the FG initials. This die variety was originally used in 1989 and beyond. But somehow, a small batch had been mistakenly used a year early. His 1988 D penny matched the traits exactly. The realization struck hard. He wasn't just holding a worn coin or a minor anomaly. He was holding one of the elusive transitional errors that few even knew existed. A coin minted with a reverse intended for the future. It was subtle. It wasn't flashy like a double die or as chaotic as an off-center strike. But for trained eyes, it was revolutionary that he sent the coin to be graded and authenticated. The results came back with confirmation. 1988, D. Lincoln sent with a transitional reverse of 1989, missing the well-defined FG initials due to an early die state. Experts noted that the reverse die used was one not meant for that year, likely a result of miscommunication or carryover in the mint's die inventory. These errors happened occasionally, often unnoticed until much later. But this one stood out because of its unique blending of design eras, its stealthy nature, and the clarity with which it told a story of human oversight in a mechanical world. Word spread quietly at first. A few examples began surfacing from collectors who, inspired by the discovery, began searching their old rolls and pocket change. But the 1988 D reverse era remained scarce. Only a handful of high-grade specimens were confirmed. The demand quickly outpaced the supply. The rarity of the error and the subdued way it revealed itself added to its mystique. Collectors who had ignored the 1988 cents for decades now paid close attention, examining reverse details with renewed intensity. For the casual hobbyist, it became a reason to return to the hunt. For the seasoned numismatist, it represented a missing piece, a subtle ghost hiding among billions of common coins that in recent years, this quiet rarity has established its place in modern coin lore. Unlike dramatic errors, its value comes from precision and understanding, from being able to see what's missing rather than what's added. And for those lucky enough to find a clean, well-preserved specimen, the reward is immense. Because today, the 1988 D Lincoln cent with the transitional reverse commands a stunning value on the collector market, ranging from $38,000 to $106,000 depending on condition, color, and grade. A once overlooked penny, now a crown jewel in the world of U.S. coin errors. In 2014, the United States Mint continued its modern production of the Lincoln Shield cent, a design introduced just a few years earlier in 2010 to commemorate President Lincoln's legacy and symbolize the preservation of the Union. The obverse remained untouched, still bearing Victor David Brenner's iconic portrait of Lincoln, unchanged since its first appearance in 1909. But the reverse, now bearing a simple Union shield with a banner inscribed 1 cent, brought with it a sense of modern sleekness. Though designed with precision and uniformity in mind, no minting process is ever truly immune to human or mechanical error. That year, billions of pennies rolled out of presses in Philadelphia and Denver. Routine, mass-produced, everyday coins. Most were dull in their uniformity. No one expected 2014 to be a standout year. Yet among the endless tide of perfect cents, something slipped through. Something strange. Something subtle. In a quiet corner of Oregon, a retired engineer named Walter had recently rekindled a childhood interest in coin collecting. A widower with time on his hands, he spent hours methodically sorting through change, coin rolls, and anything he could get his hands on. He wasn't hunting for fame, just small surprises, quiet thrills. One afternoon, as he examined a newly unwrapped roll of 2014 D cents, his attention froze on a coin that looked off. He turned it under the light. It gleamed with a brilliant red luster, but it wasn't the color that bothered him. It was the lettering. The motto, "In God We Trust," appeared uneven. Not worn, but ghost-like, as if the strike had hesitated. Liberty, too, was faint in patches, and the date, 2014, seemed slightly distorted. Not doubled, not misaligned, just different. The reverse, however, was as sharp as ever. He placed it aside, heart slightly racing, unsure if he had stumbled upon something or nothing. But the doubt gnawed at him. He weighed the coin, 2.5 grams, consistent with zinc composition. He checked for doubling under a loop. Nothing glaring. Still, that strange weakness in the design elements wouldn't let him rest. On a hunch, he sent the coin to a professional grading service, noting only that it struck him as unusual. Weeks passed. Then came the response. The graders confirmed what Walter's gut had told him: this wasn't a circulation-worn coin, it was a rare, early-stage strike-through error involving a die cap. Essentially, the obverse die had become partially obstructed by a thin layer of struck metal from a prior coin, forming a cap. As the cap remained on the die for multiple strikes, subsequent coins came out with weakened, ghost-like features, most especially on the obverse. It wasn't a dramatic mistake, it was a soft, creeping error that only became apparent with a trained eye. That alone was enough to catch attention. But what made Walter's discovery remarkable was the condition. Most die cap errors cause multiple defects before the issue is noticed and corrected, meaning the coins often come out with obvious signs of damage or flattening. His 2014 D cent, however, was an early-stage specimen, meaning it had the rare distinction of showcasing the error subtly while maintaining full planchet integrity and strong luster. A near-mint anomaly, news spread among specialists, and collectors took notice. The 2014 D penny wasn't previously considered a noteworthy year. That changed almost overnight. Word of the rare die cap obverse coins led to renewed interest in the year's production. Rolls of 2014 pennies were picked over, dissected, and re-examined by sharp-eyed collectors hoping for a match. A few surfaced, but none with the clean, lustrous preservation of Walter's find. Auction houses began listing authenticated examples of the 2014 D early die cap error cents, with values steadily climbing as their scarcity became understood. Unlike more recognizable errors like off-centers or double dies, this coin whispered its rarity. It didn't announce itself, it waited patiently to be noticed. Over time, prices soared. Condition was everything. Most that made it into circulation suffered wear too quickly to retain full numismatic value. But the few high-grade survivors, especially those with the ghostly obverse, still bright in mint red, became high-stakes items in the collector's market. Walter, initially content to tuck his coin into a display case, eventually agreed to part with it. It sold through a specialized auction to a private collector on the East Coast, fetching a price that exceeded every expectation. And today, the best examples of this quietly brilliant 2014 D 1 cent die cap error are known to sell for between $26,000 and $76,000, proof that even the most modern coins, even the most ordinary cents, can carry within them a secret worth a small fortune. In 2017, the United States Mint continued its routine production of the Lincoln Shield penny, a coin that had already become a staple of everyday life since its redesign in 2010. The obverse featured Abraham Lincoln's time-honored profile, stoic and consistent, while the reverse displayed the Union Shield, simple and modern, meant to reflect national unity and strength. Billions of these cents were produced, and they were never expected to stir much excitement beyond their basic use in commerce. Yet buried among those countless coins, minted mostly in Denver and Philadelphia, an anomaly was born, not loudly, not boldly, but quietly, waiting for someone to see what most would never notice. In the outskirts of San Antonio, a teenage coin enthusiast named Marcus spent weekends with his grandfather combing through change. They'd sit at the old oak dining table, magnifiers in hand, swapping stories between coins. It was their ritual. On a mild autumn afternoon, Marcus opened a roll of 2017 D cents from the bank. They were crisp and uncirculated, freshly rolled. As he slid them across the table one by one, he stopped suddenly. One coin didn't look like the others. It felt strange between his fingers. Lighter somehow. Almost insubstantial. He placed it under the magnifier. The obverse detail looked weak. Lincoln's features were blurry, lacking definition. The motto, "In God We Trust," was faded in places, not from wear, but from something else entirely. Liberty was missing part of its final letters. The date, 2017, was faint, yet the reverse was almost flawless. That imbalance struck him as strange. His grandfather leaned in. "That's not wear," he said. "That's a strike issue." Marcus had read about off-metal errors, about planchet problems, but this was different. It wasn't a dramatic wrong planchet strike. This cent looked genuine, just ghostly. They weighed it. Slightly underweight. Not enough to be disqualified as counterfeit, but just enough to raise an eyebrow. He placed it aside and kept going, but that coin lingered in his thoughts for days. He finally decided to submit it for grading and analysis. When the results came back, he couldn't believe what he was reading. The coin was confirmed to be a Rare Misruck example of a 2017 D Lincoln cent, one that had been struck on a thinner, rolled thin planchet. The planchet was within legal tolerance, but just barely. The result was a coin that looked soft on the obverse, missing details, and noticeably thinner than normal. This type of error is notoriously hard to identify unless the coin is preserved well. Most collectors never notice these coins in circulation because the weak strike gets mistaken for circulation wear. But Marcus's coin hadn't seen circulation. It was uncirculated, freshly rolled, with full copper plating and bright red luster. The only thing that betrayed it was the faintness of its detail, and that made it both mysterious and valuable. Word spread. Coin forums buzzed with speculation. A few collectors came forward with similar 2017 cents showing hints of thin planchets, but most were already damaged or too worn to be authenticated. Marcus's coin stood out because of its pristine state and well-documented origin. It had never left the original roll, and its early preservation allowed experts to classify it properly. This wasn't a flashy double die. It wasn't an off-center strike that anyone could spot. It was an error that required patience and experience to understand, an error hiding in plain sight. And as more collectors sought out these strange 2017 thin planchet errors, demand quietly grew. It took only a few years before auction houses began listing authenticated examples, and prices began to climb, particularly for coins in high mint state. Marcus's coin, once set aside without ceremony, became a talking point among seasoned numismatists. The quietest error of 2017 had finally earned a voice, and today, if you're lucky enough to find a high-grade 2017 Lincoln cent struck on a rolled thin planchet, one that still shines with its full mint luster, you're looking at a rare and coveted treasure in the world of modern U.S. coins. A coin like Marcus's, deceptively ordinary to the naked eye, now commands between $22,000 and $65,000, depending on its preservation. Proof that sometimes, what seems like the weakest strike can leave the strongest impression.